back to my channel. I'm here with another astrology oracle reading for you. And it is the week of September 26th. We have seen the sun move from Virgo and ingress into Libra, so it is officially Libra season, which I myself am a Libra sun, so I'm very excited to soon be celebrating my 30th birthday. And actually, if you are local to the Dayton, Ohio area, then I would love to invite you out to my sort of birthday celebration that we have planned at the Well on October 14th. We are going to be doing astrology-themed cocktails, a sun sign costume contest. There's going to be prizes, discounts on future services, and it's going to be a blast. So I will include a link in the show notes so that you can check that out, but very, very excited for that. So back to this moment here though, again, it is the week of September 26th. And as always, I have created an event chart for us for Dayton, Ohio at 11:11 a.m. And this is giving us a Libra sun, Libra moon, because yesterday at 5:55 p.m. we did have an exact new moon in Libra, celebrating once again that sun's ingress. We always see that shortly followed by a new moon. We have a Scorpio rising in this chart as well. So I am just very much vibing with this chart because I myself am a Libra sun and Scorpio rising. So very, very cool energy here. It is very dynamic. It is fresh. I mean, Libra is a cardinal air sign. I've talked about cardinal signs before with Cancer and Capricorn and Aries. And so it's really just ushering in a new chapter, a new season. Of course, we also just had the fall equinox. So this is, just the changing of the, leaves outside and the turning of the weather, even just the different like migration patterns that birds and butterflies have been taking and begin to take. You can just see like everything is ready to welcome something new, welcome, a change of direction, a change of pace. So what we have going on in this chart, again, is a lot of dynamic energy, especially because of that lunation, but also because the sun in this chart is at 3 degrees and Jupiter is at 3 degrees of Aries. So as I had mentioned before, we had many planets that are retrograde. It's not just Mercury right now, and Jupiter is one of them. And because Jupiter is moving backwards, it's really maintained this oppositional energy with the sun. So, again, even though last week we saw Jupiter at 4 degrees, here it is at 3 degrees, again, creating an exact opposition to the sun. We also see an exact conjunction up in Virgo between Mercury and Venus, both at 26 degrees. These are opposite to Neptune and Pisces at 23 degrees, although it's not exact because obviously 23, 26 is not the same number, but it's within enough that it's still a very impactful energy. So when we have a conjunction, just like we have with the new moon, it's a new beginning. It's the start of a new cycle beginning, right? So these planets are really closely positioned, and we're seeing conjunctions between the North Node and Uranus. They've been conjoined for a while. We're seeing this conjunction between the sun and moon, between Mercury and Venus. We also, in addition to these conjunctions, have some really strong trines happening. So we have a trine happening between Mercury and Venus to Pluto, and that's happening with the Virgo energy as well as that Capricorn energy, and they are all at 26 degrees. So this is also an exact alignment. Pretty cool to see that we do have some of those very exact moments in this chart, like I said, between that conjunction of Venus and Mercury, as well as that trine of both of those planets to Pluto and Capricorn. We also have another trine between Mars and Gemini and Saturn and Aquarius. Although they're not at the exact same degree, Saturn is at 19 and Mars is at 18. Mars is moving forward. So whereas Saturn is retrograding, Mars is not yet in its retrograde phase. So that exact alignment is just a few days away. So again, very dynamic. We have some other, trines and oppositions that aren't exact. We have some squares going on that aren't exact. But all around this chart, it's very clear that there are beginnings. And, also the cool thing about focusing on conjunctions and oppositions at the same time is that a conjunction is like the beginning and the opposition is like the halfway point, right? It's kind of like, let's just take a moment to kind of reflect on where we're at with everything. Very Mercury retrograde. But yeah, it's kind of cool just to kind of see the different phases in which these, you know, patterns of celestial movements happen, and how we can like use those patterns as like checkpoints to see, you know, how far along this journey we have to come. So let's get to the cards. I have a few cards I'd actually really love to see come up today, so we will see what happens. All right. I'm going for this one today. And it is the 6th house of daily routines. So this is actually a really interesting card to come up for this, because it is really riding that Taurus Scorpio axis. And although we're not yet into eclipse season, we have about another month or so before we're going to really get into the height of that again. I do think it is a great opportunity to kind of like reflect back on, you know, some of the typical 6th house themes. And I say that because, again, this chart has a Scorpio rising, which means that the descendant is in Taurus. There's that eclipse axis. So the 6th house is ruled by Mercury as well as Virgo. So whereas the 3rd house is Mercury and Gemini, you know, there are kind of different versions of mercurial ideas and archetypes that you'll want to pay attention to for the 3rd and 6th house. For the 3rd house, it's siblings, it's communication, it's local community, local travel. And then in the 6th house, that was the 3rd house. In the 6th house, there is like, you know, your doctor's appointments, your to-do lists, your chores, health, like bodily health, you know, taking your vitamins. It's kind of known as more of a mundane space. Nothing super sexy really takes place in the typical 6th house archetypes, but it's really like sort of the first place that we have to kind of come into our own and feel a sense of responsibility for ourselves, right? So, you know, as we age and we grow, this is a place where some people really do struggle if they weren't, you know, given a really solid foundation, you know, early in life to know how to deal with these things, right? So, you know, children who get involved in like sports and activities and associations and clubs that kind of rely on them being a part of a, you know, regularly scheduled situation, that gets them into, you know, a mindset of what that looks like. Whereas me personally, I did not grow up doing, you know, sports and activities and things of that nature. So building out like a routine, especially as my, you know, my daughter has gotten into sports, has been very difficult for me, to be totally honest. Just trying to figure out how much time to put into like organizing the day, like when do we cook dinner, when do we, you know, when do we do everything, when does homework happen? That's all such 6th house stuff. So it's definitely a house where, you know, some responsibilities and duties are going to come up right now, depending on how your chart looks. My chart looks very much like this because I'm also a Scorpio rising, so Taurus rules my 6th house. I really have an interesting relationship with routine, but I really value a routine. I really think that it provides a lot of stability, very Taurus themes there, right? That, you know, I definitely need, especially when some of my 12th house energies are very Scorpio because I use a Placidus house system. So the fact that Scorpio kind of rules into, you know, this space that's kind of like that dreamy, unknown, like it's very easy to get lost there, right? It's a lot more difficult to introduce like something new into a routine that I haven't really, you know, made space for. On the other hand, you know, there are people out there who, let's say like a Gemini rising, meaning that their 6th house is going to be a lot more associated with like Sagittarian energy, right? They could be totally fine just like going with the flow, you know, having plans to be like very much abroad in the world, but kind of be like loose and fast with like what their day-to-day looks like. So wherever you know, whatever planets you have and whatever zodiac is ruling your 6th house can give you some like insight on how you manage routines or the things that you can do with routines. Let's say you have Saturn in the 6th house. Routines could be something that make you feel very restricted. It could be something that you even have some fear around. That could be based on like how you grew up, or even just like how you saw your parents, you know, structure their days, and like the way that that, you know, kind of was read for you is just very intimidating. Let's say that you have the moon in the 6th house. You know, you could definitely be very in touch with like the lunar cycles, very aware of your emotions. It could feel very, you know, you could be easily drained on a regular basis. So again, depending on what activity you have in this house, the way that the archetypes kind of rise to the surface are going to be different for everyone. But the main basis of the 6th house, again, as the mantra on this card says, it's routines and structure. Not so much structure in like a sort of like building the house kind of way, but in more of the mercurial fashion, where it's like having a planner, having a schedule, you know, maybe having like a whiteboard with your weekly, you know, this is what's for dinner, or this is what's for lunch. Or it even reminds me sort of my 6th house Taurus of like the girls will come home from school with like their school lunch schedule for the month, or the breakfast schedule for the month. So like things like that, you know, very, very, very useful for me, because I am a very visual person. Taurus 6th house, that checks out, right? So again, depending on how you vibe and what things feel and look like for you, maybe you prefer, let's say you're a Leo rising, maybe you, with your 6th house being more associated with, let's say like Aquarius and Capricorn themes, maybe you're a little bit more into like a digitized like calendar or planner or setting reminders. I think what's really important about tuning into this house is that it's a really great way to fortify yourself. If you can understand like what your 6th house, you know, archetypes look like, how those things have developed over time and how they will continue to develop, just like nourishing this area of your chart and like bringing some like satisfaction to it, I think can actually make so many other places of your birth chart feel more stable, feel more supported, right? Where, you know, if your day-to-day life is running smoothly, then your relationships are probably running smoothly, right? Your communication's probably going better. You know, your work-life balance could probably be a lot better. And so, yeah, it's a really, you know, again, mundane, sort of boring part of the chart for some people. But for me, it's kind of like the secret area of success, really. You know, just like there are so many, you know, quotes out there for entrepreneurs that are built around like, you know, a little bit of effort every day really makes a difference. It doesn't have to be life-changing, revolutionary steps being taken on a regular basis, but just maintaining some momentum, you know, chipping away little by little. That is so 6th house themes. So if for this week, you know, these things are coming up for you, right? Again, we've been in Mercury retrograde and we will be for about another week now. And it's been a really great opportunity to kind of like look at your, you know, house dynamics, look at your friendships, look at your relationships, your work life, social systems, heck, even your finances, right? Just really reevaluating all of this and figuring out like what needs to be extracted, what needs to be added, what needs to be changed. I think it's a great idea to start thinking about how those things will change up your routine this week. You know, again, working with the 6th house mantra, really good piece of advice would be to start maybe actually figuring out what the next steps of this mercurial process looks like for you. And again, the 6th house is ruled by Mercury, so that retrograde vibe is still really truly coming through here. And I do think it is important that when we're thinking about what our routines are, that we get very realistic, right? Like it's like building a budget before you increase your income. Just because we want to have a budget and it makes sense to have a budget, you know, if you're trying to save for things and put aside money for things while you're barely getting your bills paid, are you really setting yourself up for success, right? These are kind of those like hard questions that we have to ask ourselves to be realistic and to look at the long term, because that's really what the 6th house wants us to do. This isn't the place that we want to go to start fantasizing and, you know, coming up with these really, you know, creative opportunities and planning, you know, dramatic vacations. This is more about like, where do we need to, you know, start putting pieces together so that we can have a better flow state, right? And again, when we have this area of our chart better established and running more smoothly, then the rest of our chart, the rest of the planets, the rest of the positions that we're bringing to the table with our birth chart have a better opportunity to just have a more successful expression. So let us turn to our booklet here. Also, I want to point out very interestingly that last week's episode was on the 7th house, which is directly following this house. So curious, it is kind of a retrograde behavior, right? To go back and forth between the two. All right. Martha Graham is the quote for the 6th house, and it says, "The body is a sacred garment. You must change your usual way of looking at things. The 6th house is ruled by mutable sign Virgo and the planet Mercury. In the horoscope, it's the area of routine in everyday life, not so much a dazzling place as it has to do with the ordinary. It also rules the body, but again in a different capacity to the 1st house, where that's more energy and essence and vitality. This is more like, again, going to the doctor, taking care of your health, taking your vitamins, that like the maintenance portion of it. Specifically, it has to do with the digestive tract. This house reminds us that what we should do to maintain good health. Diet is a very big signifier of this house. Anything that comes under alternative health or various approaches to strengthening the body and supporting healthy lifestyles also fall within the 6th house, which again is like why I mentioned like taking vitamins. Also doing like a detox or a cleanse would definitely be in this house's territory. It's duty, responsibility, gainful employment, how hard you work, how organized you are, the things that you worry about, your 9 to 5 kind of lifestyle, like what's keeping you busy. The 6th house represents in a reading important things to consider with regards to your health. Medical appointments, hospitals, health centers may figure into your reading. You know, again, it's Mercury retrograde time, but it's very difficult to get into a doctor's office or a dentist's office without having like months of advanced planning. So even if you are like, it's Mercury retrograde, I'm not trying to get any tests done, I don't want to get any, results that may need to be reconsidered, this is definitely an excellent time to make future appointments, because again, the likelihood that you're going to even be able to see a doctor or a dentist for some routine maintenance before Mercury retrograde is over is very, very unlikely. So go ahead and start looking at, the last time that you had some of these appointments and, get scheduled for your next one. If it's time for your annual exam, go ahead and get that on the books. And for many of us in the US, October is the time where like a lot of insurance resets, same thing in November. So if, you can start using any deductible leftover, HSA deductibles, whatever it is that you have to use, like this is a good time to just kind of plan for that stuff. Again, even if you don't get in the door, great time to make some appointments, schedule some appointments. The 6th house also has to do with disruptions to your schedule. It could benefit you to have a new form of organization to prevent additional disorganization defeating any of your plans. Very important to be analytical about your endeavors at this time, completing what you start. Also, I think a very good Mercury retrograde moment is just thinking about some of the things that you maybe have left in progress this year and what we need to kind of be circle back to, revisit, and get that stuff cleaned up so we can, set them on their way and tell them goodbye, right? Close out those deadlines, close out those projects. Just bringing a sense of completion to things that, will give you not only like the, release on your psyche, but also on your routine and your to-do list, things like that. If you're feeling critical of others or find that others are critical of you, you may want to clear up and correct these matters in case they become unhinged and take you off track. Efficiency in doing the right thing is really paramount right now. It may not be an easy time, and if that's the case, it's not meant to be. Something is really trying to find its way to you, and you're going to have to go step by step and exhibit some patience. It's not likely that these things will be happening fast, but wherever you manage to accomplish will serve you in the future. So a couple other keywords I think are super important here: volunteer work, making sure that the details are covered, that everything is in the right order. There's even indicators here of like the colon and the stomach, mental and spiritual healing, alternative medicines. Please use those with caution. Editing, you know, there's kind of like the vibe of like the hermit a little bit, right? Where it's like maybe a good time to, you know, crack open some books that you haven't finished reading or something like that, which again, all feels very Mercury retrograde and very tuned into the vibe. So yeah, you know, if you've been thinking about seeing a chiropractor or a Reiki practitioner or trying a detox and a cleanse, this could be a really good time to do some research and look into, you know, some reviews. You can hear all these words that I'm using right now. And yeah, like I said, it's unlikely that you're going to be in anybody's door for a service or for any kind of answers before Mercury retrograde is over. So don't waste any more time and get some schedules, you know, put together, make some appointments. If it's, you know, if some bills are past due, especially if they have anything to do with that, right? Like if it's time to pay up your therapist or if it's time to submit some receipts to your insurance company. This isn't necessarily super sexy advice, but if we can kind of get some of this stuff out of the way, then we get to have a little bit more fun, right? So that is kind of where the vibe is here for this week. I hope that this resonates for you, and I would love to know if you can leave a comment and tell me, you know, yes, if this is hitting for you. Do you have some appointments that need to be made and some bills that need to be reviewed and some books that maybe need to be finished? I certainly know I do. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you all next week. Bye.